subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.
My name's Edward Carter. People used to call me Mr. Carter with a kind of respect that straightened their backs when they said it. Some even smiled when they did. For 37 years, I was a high school history teacher in a quiet town just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I wasn't the kind of teacher who counted down the days to retirement, no. I believed in what I taught. I believed in the kids. I wore my tie even on field trip days. I brought antique coins and old Army medals to class, told stories from history like they were campfire tales. Students leaned forward when I spoke, not because they had to, but because I made them want to. I had a wall in my classroom where every graduating student who went on to college could tack a postcard. By the time I left, the wall was full. That was me. I was also a husband. My wife, June, passed away 8 years ago. Cancer, quick and merciless. I watched the strongest woman I knew disappear, piece by piece. After she died, the house got quieter. Too quiet. But I had the kids. Daniel, Mark, and Alyssa. They were grown, had their own lives, but they still came around. Or at least they used to. We had a tradition, Sunday dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, Alyssa's oversalted green beans. We'd sit around the old oak table I built with my own hands in '89. Laughter, wine, stories. I held onto those dinners like lifelines. But life has a cruel way of changing without your permission. This winter, I slipped on the ice outside the back porch. Just a patch, no bigger than a dinner plate. My hip cracked before I hit the ground. I laid there for what felt like an eternity, staring up at the gray sky, wondering if I'd be found before the snow covered me. The mailman found me. He'd noticed the letters stacking up. Funny, I spent my life surrounded by people, and it was a stranger who saved me. After surgery, the hospital called my children. They visited. Once. They brought a suitcase and said all the right things. Just until you're stronger, Dad. This place looks nice. You'll have everything you need. They kissed my forehead and wheeled me into St. Mary's like I was being dropped off for summer camp. I remember Daniel looking at his watch, even as he smiled. Alyssa cried. Mark didn't look me in the eye. And then they were gone. That was 6 months ago. The room they left me in smells like bleach and lukewarm peas. Pale yellow walls. A TV that flickers even when it's off. My neighbor, Roger, has dementia and thinks I'm his brother. The nurses are kind but overworked. I know the sound of the food cart better than I know my own voice now. I keep a picture of June on the nightstand. In it, we're young. I've got my arm around her, and she's laughing. The kind of laugh that shakes a room. Some nights, I talk to that picture. I ask her what I did wrong. Because here's the part they don't tell you when you give your life to your job, your marriage, your children, there's no guarantee anyone will remember. No matter how much you gave, how hard you tried, how many birthday candles you lit, or school lunches you packed, the world keeps moving. And if you fall, really fall, it might not stop to pick you up. I used to be somebody. Now I'm just room 214B. And no one's come to visit. The worst part wasn't the leaving. It was how normal they made it seem. Daniel was the one who spoke the most. He's always been the planner. Financial advisor, suit and tie, phone glued to his hand. He talked to me like he talks to his clients, smooth, firm, rehearsed. Just a few weeks, Dad. Till you're stable on your feet again. This place is clean, staff seems good. You'll rest here, get your strength back. We'll figure out the next step soon. I nodded. What else could I do? I was in a wheelchair, stitched and sore, with a plastic hospital bracelet still clinging to my wrist. I could barely stand without help, let alone go home to an empty house with stairs and no one to catch me. Alyssa was quieter. She didn't come inside right away. I saw her through the hallway window, pacing by the vending machines, wiping at her eyes with a sleeve that had too many bracelets. Eventually, she stepped in, hugged me longer than the others. I'm sorry, Daddy, she whispered, voice catching. Just for now, okay. I almost believed her. Mark didn't say much at all. He stood in the corner, arms crossed, jaw clenched. I don't know if it was guilt or indifference. Maybe both. He looked like he couldn't wait to get back to his truck. His son was in the car. I didn't even get to say hello to my grandson. They left the engine running. They wheeled me to room 214B like it was any other delivery. My suitcase, that old Navy one from the family Disney trip, rattled behind us. One of the wheels was broken, so it dragged slightly. I could hear the soft thunk-thunk as it rolled unevenly over the linoleum. When the nurse left, the silence in the room was thick. Not heavy, heavy can be comforting. This was hollow. Like a place sound comes to die. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, hands in my lap, and waited. I thought maybe they'd come back in. Say goodbye again. Bring coffee. Hug me one more time. Something. But minutes passed. Then an hour. And then, I heard the car pull away. I shuffled to the window and pulled the curtain back with shaking fingers. Alyssa's red coat disappeared into the back seat. Daniel's Tesla merged into traffic. Mark's pickup was already gone. They didn't look back. The nurse checked on me a few hours later. "They get home okay?" she asked, trying to sound cheerful. "Yeah," I said, my voice drier than the air in the vents. "Don't worry," she added, writing something in my chart. "Families usually come around more once the patient settled." I nodded, but I didn't believe her. There was a tone in her voice, not cruel, but practiced. Polite lies wrapped in sympathy. She'd said this before, probably too many times to count. I didn't sleep that night. The bed was comfortable enough, but the room was foreign. I wasn't in my home. I didn't hear the soft creak of the hallway floorboards or the hum of the old fridge that June used to hate. I didn't smell her lavender lotion or the faint trace of pipe smoke that still clung to my bookshelves. Instead, I lay there and watched the digital clock blink red numbers into the dark. 1:48. 2:35. 3:11. The hours passed. No calls. No texts. Nothing. They left me here like a piece of luggage, something they didn't know what to do with, so they dropped it somewhere out of the way. I raised them. I held their hands through nightmares. Taught them how to tie their shoes and drive and apologize when they were wrong. I showed up at every school play and science fair. I stayed up grading papers so I'd still have time to make them breakfast in the morning. And now, I was too much trouble. Too much weight. They dressed it up in soft words and promises of temporary. But I knew what this was. I'd seen it before, in other families, other homes. We always tell ourselves we'll never be like that, we'll never abandon our own. Until one day, someone says, it's just for a little while. And the door clicks shut behind you. There's something strange about being invisible while still alive. You think it'll happen slowly, the forgetting. Like fog rolling in, soft and quiet. But that's not how it works. One day, you're a person. The next, you're a chart, a diagnosis, a body in a bed with an ID number. Mr. Carter becomes Ed. Then Pops. Then nothing. That's how it was for me. The first week, I kept my phone beside me. Fully charged, sound on. I even cleaned the screen with one of those wipes they leave on the meal tray. Every buzz made my heart jump. But it never buzzed. I checked the Wi-Fi password 3 times. Maybe I wasn't connected. Maybe the messages just weren't coming through. But they were. They just weren't coming at all. The nurses were decent, though mostly in a rush. They called me sweetheart and sir when they remembered. But they had too many bodies and not enough hands. I stopped asking for help after the 3rd time a nurse sighed before turning around. Across the hall from me, there's a woman named Mabel. She used to be a nurse herself, 40 years, she says. Now she folds napkins all day and talks to her husband, who's been gone since '96. Sometimes she thinks I'm him. I don't correct her anymore. She's the only one who remembers my name. Edward, she says, clear as daylight. You always kept your shoes polished. I don't know if she's remembering me or someone else, but it's nice to hear my name spoken like it matters. The days bleed together here. There are no weekends, no holidays. Just a rotating cycle of beige meals, blood pressure checks, and too much TV with the volume up too loud. Sometimes the chaplain comes by. He wears a plastic smile and talks to us like we're already gone. I remember walking into classrooms and hearing 100 voices quiet down. I remember hands raised, eyes shining with questions. Now I speak, and no one looks up. The hardest part isn't the boredom. It's being unseen. There was a day last month when one of the younger aides came in, Dylan, I think his name is, earbuds in, chewing gum like he hated it. He changed my sheets like I wasn't even in the bed. Rolled me like luggage. I tried to ask him about the weather, just something to hear another human voice directed at me. He said, "Yeah," and walked out. That was the entire conversation. It was snowing outside. I sat by the window after he left, watching the flakes fall in slow spirals. I used to take Alyssa sledding in weather like that. She'd scream all the way down the hill, cheeks red, scarf flying behind her like a cape. Now she won't even answer my messages. I tried calling again the other day. Left a voicemail. I didn't ask for anything. Just told her I saw snow and thought of her. I said I hoped she was doing okay. She didn't call back. I used to believe that love was something you could plant in people, that if you raised them right, loved them hard enough, it would grow inside them forever. But maybe that's not true. Maybe it shrivels. Or maybe they rip it out when life gets too crowded. Sometimes I wonder if I did something wrong. Was I too strict? Too soft? Did I miss something? Did I say no too often or not enough? It's a dangerous place, your own mind, especially when no one else visits it. I try not to spiral. I try to stay grounded. But when you go days without hearing your name, without feeling the warmth of someone's hand in yours, without anyone remembering you taught their children how to read a map or believe in themselves, you start to question everything. The other day, a nurse dropped off lunch and forgot to take my breakfast tray. I waited. And waited. It sat there for 6 hours. The oatmeal hardened into something like cement. The coffee went cold, skin forming on top. No one noticed. And I realized, I could be gone for days, and no one would know. Not my kids. Not the nurses. Not even the guy who brings the ice water. That's the part no one warns you about getting old. You don't die once. You die in pieces. First your role. Then your usefulness. Then your voice. Then your name. It happened on a Thursday. Not a special Thursday. Not a birthday, not a holiday, not anything marked on a calendar. Just another beige, lukewarm Thursday in the forgotten wing of a building that smells like antiseptic and mashed potatoes. The volunteers came in around 3 p.m. College kids, fresh-faced, full of nervous smiles and good intentions. I heard them before I saw them, guitars tuning, high-pitched giggles, the clatter of cookie trays. They were doing some kind of music and memory afternoon. I wasn't planning to go. But Mabel asked me to wheel her down. Said she had a good feeling. So I did. They'd set up in the common room, folding chairs arranged in sloppy rows, a young woman at the piano, and another with a guitar slung over her shoulder. Some of the residents were already asleep in their chairs. One man was drooling on his lap. No one seemed to mind. Then the girl with the guitar started to sing. It was Hallelujah. Not the church version, the Leonard Cohen one. Her voice was thin, a little shaky, but there was something honest in it. Something real. It cracked a little on the second verse, and instead of hiding it, she leaned into it. Let it break. And something in me did, too. Tears started falling before I even knew they were there. Not the loud, dramatic kind. Just quiet. Like rain on a window. I couldn't remember the last time I'd cried. Not when I fell. Not when the kids left. Not when I realized no one was coming back. But this girl, this stranger who didn't even know my name, reached something in me that had been sealed off for years. Not with a touch. Not with a speech. Just a song. Afterward, while the others clapped weakly or dozed off again, I asked one of the volunteers for a piece of paper. He smiled and handed me a folded napkin and a pen. I sat there, right in the middle of the common room, and wrote something down. Not for my children. Not for the nurses. For me. They left you, but you are still here. You were someone. You still are. You were not garbage. You were a builder. You were a name. You still are. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't even proper grammar. But it was mine. That night, I skipped dinner. Not out of protest. I just didn't want the taste of anything bland in my mouth. I needed the flavor of something real. I sat by the window instead and looked out into the black winter evening. Snowflakes, again. Floating like tiny, silent revolutions. I stared at my reflection in the glass, an old man in a chair, hunched and gray. But behind my eyes, I saw someone else. Someone who stood at chalkboards and read novels to his kids in funny voices. Someone who kissed his wife's forehead every night before sleep. Someone who mattered. And slowly, deliberately, I whispered to that man. I remember you. It was the first moment I felt like I belonged to myself again. Not to a diagnosis, not to a bed chart, not to the guilt of children or the silence of phones. Just me. I slept deeply that night. No ghosts. No regrets. Just breath in, breath out. The next morning, I asked the head nurse if I could volunteer, maybe read to the residents, or help with crossword puzzles. She looked surprised. Almost confused. You don't have to do that, Mr. Carter, she said. You're not staff. I'm not dead, either, I replied. That made her smile. Small victories. Later that week, I started talking to the other residents. Really talking. Not the "how's your soup" kind of talk. I asked about their lives. Their real stories. And I listened. Turns out Mabel had sung at Carnegie Hall. Tom, the man who always shuffled in slippers, had once been a math professor at MIT. Louise had been a Broadway seamstress. We weren't forgotten people. We were the damn scaffolding of this country. And I'd spent too long letting the world decide that we didn't matter anymore. Not anymore. That Thursday broke me. But sometimes, a break isn't the end. Sometimes it's the first crack where light gets in. The following Friday, I pulled on my old tweed jacket. The one with the elbow patches. The one that still smelled, faintly, of chalk dust and aftershave and memory. I hadn't worn it in years. I had to brush off a few crumbs and a little time. But it still fit. Barely. At lunch, I stood up slowly, cleared my throat, and clinked my spoon against my water glass. The sound bounced awkwardly off the walls of the cafeteria. A few heads turned. Some didn't. Mabel looked up and smiled. Tom raised an eyebrow. I used to be a teacher, I said. A few chuckled. A few blinked. I taught history. 37 years. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. And because someone needs to remind people who they are, and where they come from. So, if anyone's interested, I'll be in the activity room after lunch. I'll be talking about the Battle of Gettysburg. Silence. Then, Mabel clapped. Slow and steady. And Tom. Then Louise. Then a few more. At 2 p.m. sharp, I wheeled into the activity room. I expected maybe 2 or 3. There were 9. I stood, leaning on my cane, in front of a whiteboard with a dry erase marker that barely worked. I talked about the Union lines. About the wheat field. About Pickett's charge and Lincoln's address. But mostly, I told stories. About courage. About sacrifice. About what happens when people forget who they are. They listened. Really listened. One of the nurses popped in halfway through and stood in the back. By the end, even she was leaning forward, mouth slightly open. When I finished, no one moved for a long moment. And then, softly, someone said, "You should do this every week." So I did. Every Friday. Some days we talked about World War II. Other days about the civil rights movement. Sometimes I just told them about June, how she once got kicked out of a bookstore for correcting a tour guide's dates. She was right, by the way. Soon, staff started inviting me to share with their kids. I gave a short talk in a 5th grade classroom over Zoom. They asked questions about the Vietnam War and about life before cell phones. One girl wanted to know what it felt like to fall in love in the 60s. I told her, like hearing your favorite song on a record player, crackling and warm and unforgettable. By month's end, someone from the local paper called. We heard there's a history teacher making waves at St. Mary's. I smiled. Just ripples, I said. But ripples still move water. That Sunday, for the first time in months, my phone rang. It was Alyssa. Dad, she said, hesitating. I didn't know you were still there. I mean, I thought Daniel said. I'm still here, I said gently. I saw the article. About the lessons. The kids. They say you're incredible. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence do the talking. Can I visit? She asked, voice soft. If you want to, I said. But I won't be waiting by the door. More silence. But this one felt different. Not heavy. Just real. After we hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't rejoice. I folded my jacket over the chair, turned off the lamp, and sat by the window. Outside, the trees swayed in the evening wind. One had lost all its leaves. But it still stood. Still reached. That's when I understood something no textbook ever taught me. They forgot who I was. So I reminded them. Not with anger. Not with guilt. But with presence. With stories. With truth. And that, more than anything, is what teaching really is. Not forcing someone to remember. But living in such a way that they can't forget. A week later, Alyssa came. I was in the middle of reviewing lesson notes for a small group of high schoolers who were visiting for their community project, something about oral history and bridging generational gaps. One of the girls had dyed green hair and a notebook full of scribbles. Another boy had a camcorder. They asked me questions like I was some kind of artifact. But they listened. That part mattered. I didn't notice Alyssa at first. She stood quietly by the doorway, coat in her arms, eyes glassy. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Just softer. Like time had trimmed something sharp off of her. I finished my sentence. And when you live long enough, you realize that history isn't something behind you. It's something you carry. Then I looked up. Our eyes met. She didn't cry this time. That surprised me. She waited until the students left, waving politely, some thanking me like I was a war hero. And then we were alone. For a second, I thought she might speak first. But she didn't. So I did. I've been doing okay. She nodded. Her hands gripped the sleeves of her coat like they might keep her anchored. I saw the article, she finally said. It was impressive. I nodded. Silence. She looked around the room, the board, the plastic globe, the stack of books I'd borrowed from the facility library. Dad, I didn't know how to come back, she said. After we left you here. I kept thinking you were angry. Or hurt. Or disappointed. I was all of those things, I replied. Calm. Steady. Not cruel. She winced. I didn't know how to fix it, she whispered. I leaned back in my chair. You can't fix the past, Alyssa. But you can show up in the present. Or not. That's your choice. She looked at me like I'd just handed her a key she didn't know she needed. I'm sorry, she said. I know. She stayed for an hour. We talked. Light things, mostly. About her work. Her kids. A trip she wanted to take but kept postponing. She asked if I needed anything. I've got everything I need, I said. And I meant it. She looked confused at that. Maybe even a little hurt. Like she expected me to ask for more. But that was the quiet revenge. I didn't need them anymore. Not like before. They left me, thinking I'd sit here and wilt. That I'd grow bitter and small, shrinking into the cracks of this place until I faded completely. but I didn't. I rose. Not dramatically. Not with fists and fire. But with presence. With purpose. With the unshakable truth that I still mattered, even if they couldn't see it. That's the kind of revenge that cuts deeper than silence or blame. It's living well. Living fully. Living on your terms. A few weeks later, Mark called. Said he'd been meaning to. That he heard I was some sort of legend at the retirement center. I laughed. Legends don't sleep in orthopedic beds, Mark. He chuckled too. It wasn't perfect. But it was something. Even Daniel sent a message, a short one. Read about you in the paper. Hope you're doing well, Dad. I replied. I am. That was it. No drama. No long confessions. Just dignity. I still sit by the window most evenings. Watch the wind bend the trees, watch time roll by like traffic on a quiet road. But now, I sit straighter. There's a calendar on the wall marked with upcoming talks. A folder with letters from students. A photo on the nightstand, not just of June now, but one of me, standing at the whiteboard, hand midair, explaining something to a room full of faces that see me. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I waited. And when the silence grew heavy, I didn't drown in it. I spoke into it. I reminded the world, and myself, who I was. And now, they remember. Not because I made them feel guilty. But because I made them feel something real. That's the lesson. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You just need to speak with truth. And keep speaking, even when no one is listening. Especially then.